Hi, and welcome to Virtual Live at Frost Science. We are so excited to have you join us today on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. It's going to be a wonderful day filled with hopefully getting out in nature in this beautiful weather we're having today. I'm so glad the humidity is a little less. And I'm so excited to introduce to you our featured presenter. Shannon Jones has been with the museum for a little over 2 years as our conservation programs manager. Shannon, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. Like you said, it is amazing outside. So I got to come outside to give this little presentation today. So I'm super excited about it.
Well, we're so excited to have you, and we can't wait to hear about all the wonderful initiatives and ways that we can make big changes in nature with little actions that we can actually do at home, even now. So I will let you take it away and get started, and I can't wait to hear more.
Awesome. So like you said, my name is Shannon Jones, and I am the Conservation Programs Manager at Frost Science. And what my main goal entails is helping organize all of our conservation initiatives, as well as overseeing our Museum Volunteers for the Environment program. We call it MUVE. And so I have a really big task, great task of getting the public involved in environmental education and sustainability, getting their hands dirty and learning about the environment. So that's why I'm here today. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is little steps that we can do from home to make big changes in some of the issues that we're seeing, the planet is seeing right now. So first, a little history. Today is Earth Day, and it is actually Earth Day's 50th anniversary, as Angela said. So it started in 1970. A senator at the time, Gaylord Nelson, was the senator of Wisconsin. And a year before, he witnessed a horrible oil spill off of California. And he just thought that we really need to do something to make a big impact and difference in protecting the planet for our future. So he started this unified effort with across the board. So Republicans, Democrats, universities, general citizens really started pushing to protect environmental resources. And on April 22nd in 1970, there was a big protest where everyone, went to the streets and really started fighting for the environment so that there would be changes made that we protect our resources. And this is really credited for starting the environmental movement. So I'm forever grateful for Earth Day. And that year started the ball rolling on the Environmental Protection Agency and a lot of important acts that we rely on now to protect the environment, like Clean Air Act, Clean Water, Endangered Species. It all really is credited with starting in 1970. So today we are seeing a lot of threats for the environment. Changes in climate is a really big one, and it has a lot of moving pieces and a lot of components. And so, for example, here in Miami, changes in climate may affect the sea level rise, or we're seeing stronger storms, and our water is more acidic and warmer. But in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world, they're seeing threats in a different way from some changes in climate. Everywhere we're seeing habitat loss and fragmentation. Invasive species are a huge problem, and pollution and waste is another one that I'm going to touch on today. So I'm going to go through these, and then I'm going to come up with some ways that you can kind of make little changes or learn at home so that you can help each one of these issues. So first, habitat loss and fragmentation. A habitat is an area with the resources and conditions a species or organism needs to survive. So for example, in the ocean, parrotfish live on coral reefs. So that would be their habitat. They need the corals to provide them food. They need shelter, and that's where their home is. And so some reason that we have experienced across the globe habitat loss is for a bunch of different reasons. So development. So for example, if you look back in history books of Miami, Miami Beach used to be mostly mangrove habitat, but we developed that area so that we can have the Miami Beach that we have now and we love. Like I said, changes in climate, so more acidic oceans are going to affect those coral reefs, or sea level rise. We're going to lose some of our coastlines. And so that just kind of alters the habitat, or we lose some of it. Another big one is for food production, which is one of the main reasons why we have habitat loss, is because we take the land so that we can have agriculture, we can have crops that we need for food, and animals and livestock that we use for instant products. So fragmentation is a word that, to be honest, when I started in this field, I didn't really know what it meant, and I just would hear it all the time. But it's habitat loss in a different way, where you're cutting a whole area into smaller segments or pieces. So for example, in this picture that you see here, a road is cutting through a forest. So by looking at that, you would probably think, oh, it's not a big deal. Look, there's still pretty nature all around. It's great. We use the roads to get around. But if you look closely, you might realize that some of the smaller animals that usually walk that path now have to cross over a dangerous street. Or maybe there's this one patch of the forest we didn't know about that only has this really special berry that one animal needs to eat. And it has to cross the street every single day to get there. Or smaller animals, maybe their population then gets cut in half because they can't reach the other side, and now they have to start inbreeding, and it creates diseases and illnesses. So sometimes fragmentation, you don't think it can be an issue, but there's so many examples of it out there where it is actually causing a lot of issues on the earth. So like I said, one of the biggest reasons for habitat loss is for agriculture industry. So my little step for your big change is eating less meat. And why? So the agriculture industry is, agriculture is the science of farming, which includes growing crops and rearing animals to provide food and other products. But animals specifically, they need space and they need food. So we're going to clear areas so that our livestock can roam and be healthy and walk around, and there can be lots of them. And then they also need to eat. So now we have to clear areas and grow crops for the animals to eat so that we can eat them. And a lot of that space could be a little less if we were eating those plants directly. So just a little less. Animals also, or livestock also produces some greenhouse gases, mostly in the form of methane. So when there's a lot of cattle or cow in one small space, they're going to be producing methane, which is mostly from their burps and their poo and their farts. But there's a lot of them in one space, in one area, and all across the world, they're going to be producing a lot in one day. And those gases go out into our environment, and they create what we call a greenhouse gas effect, which in a very simplified terms is pretty much, if you can imagine going into a greenhouse where they're growing a lot of pretty flowers, and maybe you're up north and it's kind of cold, so you're cold outside, then you walk into the door to see the flowers, and all of a sudden it's hot, it's humid, and you're warm, and the plants are thriving even though it's the middle of winter. And that is because the covering of the greenhouse is keeping that heat inside. And so the gases pretty much are doing that with our whole planet. And they're going out into the atmosphere, and they're creating a layer that the heat cannot go back out of the atmosphere. And that's what's warming our environment, in a very small, quick explanation.
A quick question on that, Shannon. Yeah. So you mentioned methane from these animals. Is methane a big deal? I mean, whenever I hear greenhouse gases, I always hear about carbon dioxide is the main one that I hear about. So what kind of role does methane play versus carbon dioxide in this whole process?
Yeah, so carbon dioxide is definitely the one we hear about most, and methane is another. There's a bunch. There's a lot of gases that are getting put out into the atmosphere. A lot of it's happening naturally, and then a lot of it is being expedited, especially through the agriculture industry. Methane specifically, so I don't have the exact quantities of it, but this gas actually heats up the planet faster, but can go away faster. So in short-term health, the less agriculture that we have, the faster that it will cool down, if that makes sense. And each gas that we have that is going out into our environment has a little bit of a different effect, and that's why they're individually studied. But the one we hear most about is carbon dioxide, but there are plenty of others. Hopefully that answers your question. So a lot of times people hear eat less meat and they just panic, and I completely understand. A lot of times meat is part of culture. You need to have different types of protein. Everyone's different, everyone's tastes are different, and I completely get it. So I like to recommend making it fun. So I've heard of a bunch of different ways to do it. Meatless Monday, I think, is the most famous, so I'm going to talk about that really quick. My mom does vegan before 4. There's plenty of other, just one vegetarian meal a day, and it can make a really, really big impact. So Meatless Monday, I'm going to use that as an example because especially when we are staying at home, we have to maybe start getting creative on some of our meals. And for me personally, I love to cook, so I guess I'm a little biased, but it's fun to come up with new recipes and ways to tweak old recipes to make them vegetarian friendly, especially on this Meatless Monday. But if you don't want to go into all that, you could still have a sustainable meal all day long and still get all the nutrients that you need. So for example, for breakfast, you can have a croissant and a smoothie. I had a smoothie for breakfast this morning. It's got packed with, I used some, protein powder and berries and kale. So a lot of nutrients that I needed, and I still didn't eat the animal product for that day. Lunch, you can have a salad, classic peanut butter and jelly. So it's really easy to do. Dinner, I'm Italian, I had to put pasta here, beans and rice and some type of vegetable, and then there you go, there's your food for the day. And it's really simple, and if you just do it for one day, the amount of impact that you can have can be huge. All right, so my next topic is invasive species. So invasive species are something that we in my field, especially in our habitat restoration programs, we encounter all the time. And I'm not really sure how much other people realize that they're encountering it on their daily basis. So first, native versus exotic species. So a native species is an animal or plant that belongs in that ecosystem or that habitat. So for example, on our restoration site at Virginia Key, we work on a dune sometimes, and there is a native plant called the sea oat, which is the one that we plant on a regular basis on the dune, and it provides really good shoreline stabilization and creates a habitat for wildlife that's supposed to be in that area. So exotic species are ones that aren't historically or naturally found in an area. So it can come for so many reasons. There's plenty of reasons why they come here. Mostly it's because of human related impacts, even if we don't mean to. So for example, if a cargo ship is traveling from Europe and then coming over to America, it might have some type of something stored on the bottom of the ship and we don't know, comes over here and then it gets stuck at dock and then it's now introduced to our area. Sometimes we bring it on purpose. So for example, in Hawaii, there is a plant called scabola, and it is a really good natural shoreline stabilizer. And so here in Miami, we thought it would be a good idea to bring it over from Hawaii before we knew about the problem invasives and plant it so that we could have stabilized shorelines as well. But it's not supposed to be here, and it turned into an invasive species. So there's a difference between exotic and invasive. Invasive species are ones that take over an area, so they make the ecosystem unbalanced. They don't have natural predators, and they just thrive. Whereas an exotic species can be here, not supposed to be, but it doesn't cause much damage. And studies have found, they point to invasive species as the second leading cause for species extinction, which is a pretty big deal because it's something that I don't think a lot of people realize is such a big issue. You can still go to any store and buy any plant pretty much, even if it's not from here, that can be introduced. You can buy a lot of exotics and invasive species and plant them in your front yard if you didn't know any better. So some of the reasons why they are the leading cause is they have no natural predators. For example, we have the issue in the Everglades here with the Burmese python. And when they were introduced, they didn't have much natural predators. There's a lot of videos out there of them like wrestling the alligators, which is not great. It's not a natural thing and it shouldn't even be happening. But they're thriving because they don't have any natural predators. It can create unbalanced ecosystems. So this tree here is an example of an Australian pine. And we see them, they're all over Virginia Key and actually all over Florida. And they create this monoculture because they just take over an area and block out the ability for other plants to grow. So if you're looking at an Australian pine forest, there's a good chance you don't see any other plant species growing. So really diminishes biodiversity. They don't really help any plants or other animals, so they don't really provide great shelter. They don't really provide great food because they're not supposed to be here. Another famous one here in Miami, we have the lionfish, and all over the Caribbean and in Florida. And this lionfish really takes over and creates a strong resource competition for our native fish that we really rely on. So they can eat up all the food that our native fish need to survive and take over some of the shelter that they need. So they're really messing with their habitat and their way of life and unbalancing the ecosystem. So your little step for a big change is to try to grow or plant native species. For me, I've been really taking up gardening since being home, and I really like to learn about the different species of plants that I can grow that would create a benefit. So for example, each species that's supposed to be here has its own biological role for the area that maybe we don't even know about. But one example is the kunti plant, which is seen here in this picture. And this plant was harvested and we hadn't used it for a really long time. And we didn't realize that it's the host plant for the Atala butterfly. This butterfly is an endangered species. And once we started realizing that and bringing the kuntis back into landscaping, into areas where they're supposed to be, we started to see the butterflies come back as well. So if you see a bunch of kunti plants together, it's really cool. And they always have the bright red caterpillars on them and with yellow spots. And that's the only plant that this caterpillar will use to grow. And now we're seeing a comeback of that species. So it's really unique to have one plant that provides such an important role. And that's why it's important to use your natives, because you can have an effect down the line. So do your research and make sure you look at what benefits your area when you're planting, and when purchasing plants, talk to the seller or the grower to make sure you can know where it came from. I wouldn't plant the same plants here in Miami that I would in Pennsylvania where I grew up. Question?
So a quick question for you. So I love this idea. Is there any sort of plants that you're aware of that we could plant maybe smaller for people that live in apartment buildings or, don't have access to a lot of land that would create some of these benefits?
Yeah, there's plenty. I don't have them all off the top of my head, but absolutely I have my windows. So I lived in an apartment here in Miami for 6 years, so I totally understand. I had one window that got light and it was full with plants, and so there are plenty, and it's really up to what you're interested in, or if you really want from flowers, there's plenty of flowers that can grow well in your area. If you have a balcony, you can grow maybe some bigger things in pots, but as long as you are watering, it's getting enough sun, and it has the right soil, for the most part they're pretty easy to maintain, especially if you have things that are going to get outside, because those caterpillars, for example, butterflies or pollinators, they can still get to your balcony and then pollinate that plant and it can still thrive. So we really still want those to be a native species. So the other thing you can do, I'm kind of cheating and giving you two because I'm putting in a little plug for the City Nature Challenge, which is upcoming this weekend. So if you're not familiar, the City Nature Challenge is an international competition between cities to document nature. So it's a giant bioblitz. And so what a bioblitz is a period of time where you are documenting as much nature that you can find in one specific area. So normally this happens the second to last weekend of April. And it's a big competition, and we wake up at midnight on Friday and we're picking as many pictures as we want. And then all weekend long, we usually have events where you can come and you can learn about how to get involved and help us win. Last year, Cape Town really blew us all out of the water. California cities always do great. So Miami and South Florida, we really try to win. This year, we've adapted a bit because we didn't really want to make it a competition as much as a unity thing. So we're all going to still go out in nature the best that we can, take pictures of plants and animals that we can see maybe through our window or in our backyard or on a safe walk, and get involved that way. So we're still going to do it. It's awesome. It's so much fun. And how you get involved is it's a citizen science project where you can go out and observe nature. Like I said, you can find animals, plants, fungus, or even evidence of wildlife. So I just went on a walk with my dog about an hour ago. We saw an eggshell. I can take a picture of that. And then you upload it, take a picture, and then you upload it to iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is a citizen science application where you can take these photos of document nature, you put it into their database, and then you have this incredibly dense database of nature that you found it's all over the world, but you can go into smaller areas so we can look at just what we're finding in Miami, just what we're finding at Miami Beach, even just one particular beach, and to see what types of plants and animals are there. And at the same time, you can also see where individual animals are found. So if some researcher wants to do a research project on where we're finding invasive green iguanas, they can go in, look up at all those places, and then they can do a research project on the data that citizen science has found. You have a question?
So is this iNaturalist app, is this free? Is it free for anyone to download? And then also, does it work on Android, iPhones? Do I need a particular platform, or can I even just use it on the internet? Can you tell me a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, so all of the above. It's free, but all the phones have it, and definitely on the computer as well. It's inaturalist.org. And you can find all this information on our Frost Science website. So if you have any questions, you can find all that information there. But yeah, you can. So for me, I have it on an app on my phone. If I'm out and I see a picture of something, I want to upload it right away. Other people will take their camera on a nature walk. They'll take pictures. They'll go home and they'll upload it to their computer, and then they'll find the best pictures and input it that way. It all works. That website is really user-friendly, and you can learn a lot about the species in the area, which brings me to my next step. So part of the competition is IDing the species that we find. So for the photos, it's only this weekend. It's a BioBlitz from Friday at midnight until Monday at midnight. So Monday into Tuesday. And so April 24th to April 27th. It's the only time you can take the pictures. And then after that, we have until May 3rd to ID what we're finding. So this is the great opportunity for when you're home to go online and learn about the species that people are finding in Miami and in the area nearby, even anywhere in South Florida. And you can ID them, and then it can become a research opportunity for you and for researchers out there.
That sounds amazing. I'm definitely going to be checking that out, and I hope many of our wonderful viewers will as well, because it works in any city. So many cities are doing this that even if you aren't local here in Miami, obviously in Miami we want to make a big impact with this, but even if you're somewhere else, check what local cities may be doing it for you as well. We had a question that was around invasive species from Renee's daughter. She asked if you had mentioned that pythons, when they were first introduced to the Everglades, they didn't have any natural predators. Do they have any natural predators now that you know of?
That's a really good question. I'm no means a python expert, but I am under the impression that a little bit more. So the problem with them is that they get so big. So when they're very small, their eggs can get eaten, and they're, as little snakes, things that eat snakes maybe will go towards them. But once they get so big, there's not many other animals that eat. Usually, like, the rule is if an animal sees something 3/4 their size, they're not going to go after, because that is more of a threat to them to tackle down and eat than something smaller would be. So these pythons get so big that there's not much out there that can eat them. But as they're younger, they're a little bit more vulnerable to that. All right, so I think I covered, my one more warning with iNaturalist is once you start IDing things, you might get addicted, so maybe put a timeline on yourself. I'll find myself scrolling while I'm trying to fall asleep, just IDing, and it's really fun, so just forewarning. All right, so my last little topic is pollution and waste. I saved it for last because it is something that kind of can overwhelm me personally, because there are so many different types of pollution that it's sometimes my brain gets overwhelmed. So air, light, waste, water, it's endless, and the different types of pollution that are out there. One of the biggest sources of the pollution is fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are a natural fuel, such as coal or gas, formed in the geological past from remains of living organisms. And we use fossil fuels for burning for the most part because it creates energy. So this burning can impact the health of ecosystems and contribute to our changing climate. They contribute to greenhouse gases. So this stuff going out into the environment is having that same effect that the methane gas like the cows had. It can create water or kind of mess up your water and your air quality. But we need fossil fuels. We use them on a daily basis for our cars, for our electricity, manufacturing, creating products. And so one of my hopes after we're all trying to start going back to a new normal is that we remember what's going on right now, and we're driving a little bit less, and maybe we're polluting the environment a little bit less with fossil fuels. Maybe we can remember that when we're going into a new normal, and maybe we can drive a little bit less or be just more conscious about what impacts our activities are having on the environment. So like I said, one of the reasons we use fossil fuels is for manufacturing and mass production of our products. One of the biggest products out there are plastics, which are not only made by fossil fuels, but made of fossil fuels. And they are designed to last a very, very, very long time. For the most part, they don't break down. Some of them just break into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, which we call microplastics. And they can stay in the environment for a very, very long time. It's estimated that there is going to be more plastic in the world's ocean than fish by weight by 2050, which is rapidly approaching. And it's kind of crazy and kind of freaks me out personally. And there's a lot of issues with that. So they can get eaten by fish. So if they're small little microplastic and then they get eaten by a fish and then a bigger fish eats them, and then we go along and catch them and now we're eating the plastic. Entanglement. I don't know if you all tuned in to Dr. K's presentation last Wednesday, but she talked about our sea turtle at Frost Science who was eating marine debris multiple times until it was determined that she couldn't go back out into the wild, and it could be because it wasn't safe for her out there. And they can alter the habitat. The chemical makeup of plastics can have an effect on, the temperature and the different chemistry in the ocean, as well as entangle corals or smother important habitats in the ocean. Big problem. Specifically, single-use plastics are something that, to be quite honest, just like blow my mind, because plastics are made to last literally forever. Like I said, they just break down, but they're made to be so durable, and yet we create them for a one-time use to be thrown away. So over half of the non-fiber plastics comes from packaging alone, which is in itself usually single-use, which contributes to our throwaway culture. So a throwaway culture is an overconsumption and excessive production of short-lived items, so like a plastic bag or a plastic bottle, instead of durable goods that can be repaired. And so, for example, the milkman, right? He used to bring a glass bottle. We would use the milk and then we'd put it out and we'd reuse those glass bottles. That's something that was durable or could be repaired, whereas now we just are buying things in a single-use plastic container. The US throws away 267.8 million tons of trash each year, and this is a statistic from 2017, so who knows where we're at now. And what that kind of is broken down to is about 5 pounds of trash per person a day. Yes, Angela?
That is crazy. 5 pounds a person.
So I'm gonna keep going.
For trash.
Okay, so what you probably think I'm gonna tell you is to use reusable items for your little steps and yeah. Oh, I think you're frozen. Little steps for a big change. Obviously, I don't even want to have to say it. I recommend using reusable things like reusable water bottle, reusable bag. If you can and you feel comfortable using a reusable straw, utensils. My purse is full of a cup, utensils, straw, and it's always with me. So I'm going to take it a step further. Instead of just doing those things, which I recommend, I want you to explore your trash, which you might think is strange, but I did it and it made a really big impact on how I saw my personal waste. So when you look through your trash can, maybe after a few times you're throwing things out, what do you find? Me personally, my biggest issue hands down is food packaging. So like chip bags or my veggie burger containers, or even little things like the rubber bands that go around my broccoli, or I don't know, there's always food waste, and that's been my bigger problem. So when I look through it, I'm like, can I eliminate some of the sources of waste? For me, I haven't been able, I go to bulk stores as much as I can for a lot of my like body products like hair, shampoo, but my food, I still kind of have an issue with it. So what are other ways that I could eliminate some of my waste? So when I go to the grocery store and I see broccoli, sometimes it's wrapped in plastic all the way, and sometimes there's just a rubber band. Okay, well, I can choose the rubber band one, and it's a little bit of less of an impact. Or for example, for you, maybe you do use plastic bags when you go grocery shopping and you don't have reusable ones. So maybe you see, oh wow, I have 25 plastic bags for my last grocery trip. Maybe the next time you can make sure to consciously try to only use 10 and cut it down that way. Reuse. Did everything in your trash can need to be thrown out? Maybe you could have made an art project out of your toilet paper rolls, or I just saw one recently. There's so many things online for the toilet paper rolls that you can use it as planters. So you can start with seeds of native plants, and it helps them sprout before you plant them out into a garden if you have one. Could you have repaired it? Do you have maybe an old pair of jeans that just had a hole in it that you could have sewed up or donated instead of thrown out? Or is there a new use, like a glass bottle could maybe turn into a vase? And if you notice, the order we've been taught our whole life is reduce, reuse, recycle. And that's the order I have it on this screen. And that I want you to think of as the order of importance for these 3 R's. I think that as a society, we've always really focused on the recycling piece, but I'm gonna try to avoid that one. Because 9% of items actually sent to the recycling facility get recycled, which is incredibly low number. There's a few reasons for that. One is that there's not much of a demand, or if there's not enough demand, then they're not gonna, it's a business. So there is a big movement now where there's a lot of things being made out of recycled plastic bottles, which is great, and that is creating a demand. So if we're buying those products, we're helping that. But things like glass bottles, here in Miami, you can only recycle your glass bottles if you're doing curbside pickup, and that's because there isn't a demand for the recycled product. It turns into sandblasting, so it's a one-time recycle, and it takes actually a lot of money to transport the heavy glass to the facility that does it. So on the alternative, aluminum is really in a demand because there's a monetary value to it. So if you had to choose between a glass bottle and an aluminum can, it's better to choose the aluminum can because you can recycle that and somebody can make money off of it. The other issue is contamination. And it's not just what you would think where you say, oh, okay, I have my yogurt container and I didn't clean it out, that's contaminated. Yes, that's part of it, but also just recycling the wrong items. So if we put out a bin and it has 10% or more of the wrong items, that whole bin gets dumped in the trash. It's not worth the recycle or waste management to sort through it themselves. So you think that would be okay, no brainer, just recycle what you can. The rules are very confusing and a lot of people don't always know what to recycle. For example, here in Miami, we can the only type of plastic we can recycle in our pickup is bottleneck bottles. So water bottles, shampoo, laundry. No food containers, no plastic bottles. If they see that in your recycling bin, they're gonna throw it out. Yeah.
So we have a question from Andrew. The 9% that you're mentioning with the recycling, is that the local number or is that actually a national average in terms of recycling?
That was a national average. And so it's important to know that we can't do this is just what I know about Miami, but Broward County, Monroe County, they might have different rules. And like I said, I'm from Pennsylvania. They have completely different rules. And to do your own research for your own area, it can be a lot of work. So all of that rant being said, currently we don't have recycling. During this pandemic, Miami-Dade County is not picking up anyone's recycling. So this is a really, really, really good opportunity for us to, again, explore your trash. What are you putting in the recycling bin that maybe shouldn't be there? Or what are you putting in the recycling bin that maybe you could have reused for something else instead of having to put it in the trash can?
And with it being so confusing, once we are able to recycle again, hopefully because the demand picks up here in Miami-Dade County, are there resources you recommend we can go to so we can learn what to recycle and what not to, where we live, that you would recommend?
Yeah, it is pretty confusing still, but if you are you in Miami, Waste Management, you can go to their website and they have the information that you need. And also on your recycling bins, most of them have stickers of what can go in there. And Our waste management has an outreach team that answers any questions that you may have. So feel free to reach out to them. And they've been always very, very responsive to me, and very honest. They just say, listen, glass isn't great for us because it costs us a lot of money. And I really appreciate that. So I would recommend Waste Management's website. And you can also reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about this clearly. All right, so those are my three main pieces and some of the things that you can do. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I think it's really important to talk about the emotion around being a conservationist and caring about the planet. This term is called environmental anxiety because it can get really, really, really overwhelming. Everywhere you look, there could be an issue, or there's invasive species over there, it's warming over here, and there's plastic over here. There's so much going on that sometimes it can get really overwhelming. So my recommendation to everyone watching, if they want to get involved and really help the environment, is to find one issue that you're really, really passionate about and start there. You can start small. Like I said, just looking at your trash can really make a big difference for yourself. For me personally, I started just loving the ocean. I love dolphins. And as I grew to study them and learn more about the ocean, I realized that there's a big disconnect between what people know about the environment and what is actually happening. So, and I found that I'm pretty good at communicating the issues, which is probably why I was asked to do it here today. So that became my passion as an environmental communicator, and really getting people involved and to love nature the way that I see it. Which brings me to MUVE. Like I said, Museum Volunteers for the Environment is just such a fantastic program. And when we are back up and running, I invite you all to come out and visit us. We have a monthly workday event, one of our parks, where we do a habitat restoration. So we remove invasive and exotic species, and we replace them with native plants that are important to wildlife, important to Miami resilience, important to protecting against effects of strong storms and sea level rise. We always say that we can do this. We could just pay a contractor to come in, remove the invasives, plant the natives, and we'd be done. But that's not the point. The point is that the general public, people, they're coming out, they're waking up on Saturday, probably don't want to do it. And then they get there and they're like, wow, I can make a huge difference just by planting some of these plants. I'm really learning and I'm getting involved. And that's really where my passion stems. And I hope I can spread that to all my viewers today. And with that, that is the end. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Shannon. This has been really amazing, a presentation. It definitely wants to make me get out into nature, not just this weekend for the City Nature Challenge, but always, and see what I can keep doing to help make a difference here, even with small little steps. We do have a few questions from our audience watching. We have Maddie, who is 8 years old, and she wanted to know, what's the most endangered plant in the world?
Oh my goodness, that is a really good question that I don't know the answer to. I'm so sorry, but I will do my research on that because that is a question I should know. But here in Miami, we do have a few, and even on the restoration site that we work on, we have some that we see little purple flowers that grow called beach peanut, and they're super cute, and I love them. And it's really crazy that you can find a plant. For me, like I said, I love the ocean, and then all of a sudden I started falling in love with plants because they are endangered and they're special too. So thanks for asking that question, and I will look up the answer.
And if we find the answer, we'll post it back to you on the Facebook comments. So don't worry about that. We also had a question from Sebastian. This was back when you were talking about fossil fuels. They were wondering, where is the most fossil fuels being burned right now in the world? Which is a trick question right now because the world's a little bit different. But pre all of this happening, where were the hot spots for this fossil fuel burning?
Again, I'm not really an expert on this topic, but I know that the agriculture industry is one of the biggest issues with it. And so what goes along with that is, cutting down the trees and creating the space to burn more and create more gases. So I think there's websites that you can look up where you can see different pieces of on the earth where there's a lot of admissions. Again, I can look it up and send it to you. I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. These are tough questions, actually.
I know, guys. Someone asked my favorite animal.
These are tough questions. And
good. I'm so glad. It's good to have tough questions because it's good to learn. I'm happy.
So we have a question from Barbara. Are iguanas invasive?
Iguanas are very, very, very much invasive. Some people consider them naturalized at this point because we're just so used to having them around, but they are invasive. They take over, and most of the reptiles that you see in South Florida and Miami are invasive.
Wow, that's kind of surprising.
If you check out this weekend during City Nature Challenge, when you upload your finds, I'm sure a lot of people will find lizards because they're everywhere here. You can see which ones are considered invasive when you make that upload.
We do have a question from Annalisa and Daniela, since you asked, what's your favorite animal?
My favorite animal is the Atlantic spotted dolphin. I think they're so beautiful and unique, and I just love them.
That's really wonderful. And then we have another question from Christy, which was, where can we find about other environmental programs that Frost Science is doing? Where can we find more information about them?
Absolutely. So our website is probably the best method. You go to frostscience.org/conservation, and you can learn about all the initiatives, not just MUVE. We have a lot of great stuff going on with coral restoration, invasive and exotic species removal. There's a lot of great stuff, so definitely check it out.
That's amazing. And frostscience.org has so many wonderful resources. Even now, when you visit our frostscience.org @home website, you can get more information, really cool science stories, one even featuring Shannon that talks about nature's biodiversity. So definitely be sure to check that out. We have another question from Maddie, who is age 8. She asks, how can we help the world if we can't recycle?
That's a great, great, great question. And I really appreciate it because I personally don't even think recycling in the sense of the facility is that important because you can do it at home. Now you can upcycle instead. So recycling is just reusing something and changing it to make it something else. So things that you can do at home, like I said, maybe you have a glass jar that used to have pickles in. You can clean it out and make it into a vase. That's recycling or upcycling. And then if you are ready to start learning about maybe composting, that's another great way. You can start doing your research on that. And that is taking your food scraps or your paper scraps and breaking it down and turning it into a nutritious type of soil that you can put out by your trees and by your plants and maybe in your garden that provides nutrients and it goes back into the earth. And it's a great way to do it.
I know some people that have started composting because of, the situation that's happening. So I'm excited to see how it works out.
I really recommend it if you have the space. I also do it. If I wasn't going to lose my internet, I would go show you my compost bin. But once I started composting, like I said, to explore your trash, I noticed a huge drop in my waste because of the food scraps, things that I couldn't reuse in other types of food, maybe like onion peels, I would throw out, and now I can put them in the compost, and it's awesome.
That is amazing. We have another question from Arlene. They asked, how long does the plant or animal have to be in an area to be considered native?
It has to historically be found there. So exotics, almost like 99.9% of the time, are something that is brought from somewhere else, and that's not going to change. It's never going to become native. It'll become naturalized, which means that, okay, we're used to having them here because they've been here for so long. But a native species, there has to be like historic records of them being there for forever. They're supposed to be there.
Wonderful. And our last question of the day is from Emmy. So will Frost Science have an environmental program that teaches people about littering and picking up trash in the community?
Absolutely. So our MOVE program that I've been talking about, once a month, whenever we go out to do our habitat restoration programs, we always also do a little cleanup. At least I tell people to do, take 3 pieces of trash. We say take 3 for the sea. So anytime you're out in the environment, picking up 3 pieces of trash, because eventually it will probably make its way to the ocean. And if everyone did that, it would make the world such a cleaner place. So at the events, I usually talk a little bit about why that's important and some of the effects that trash has on the environment. And that's where you can learn, and you can talk to me directly and learn and ask any of the questions that you may have about trash.
That's really amazing. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And thank you, Shannon, so much. We've learned an incredible amount. I hope you get out there and get moving, as we like to say. And be sure, if you're inspired by any of these conservation initiatives, to visit frostscience.org/donate to help support us keeping these programs going on now and into the future. And don't forget to tune in next week for our next virtual live at Frost Science. That's going to be about Eye of the Storm, and it's actually going to feature me. So please tune in. And we can't wait to talk to you then about hurricanes and what's happening with them as we move forward. So thank you everyone so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And please be sure to check out any resources that you'd like at frostscience.org/@home for more information. Thank you.